When most people hear the phrase mind control, they picture scenes straight out of science fiction: hypnotic rays, shadowy agents, and puppet-like obedience. The reality, however, is both more grounded and more complex, rooted in the intricate science of the human brain and the long history of efforts to understand and sometimes influence human behavior. To truly grasp what mind control means from a scientific perspective, we must first step back and examine the foundations of the mind itself and how scientists have sought to unravel its mysteries. At the center of this exploration is the human brain, a marvel of biological engineering that has fascinated researchers for decades. The brain is made up of several major regions, each with specialized roles. The forebrain is responsible for higher-level thinking and complex behaviors, while the midbrain and hindbrain manage more basic, automatic functions. Within the cerebrum lies the cerebral cortex, the outermost layer which plays a key role in memory, language, consciousness, and voluntary movement. The two hemispheres of the brain are also specialized. One side often excels at tasks like language, while the other is stronger in spatial reasoning. All of this intricate machinery is connected by a vast network of neurons, the tiny cells that transmit electrical and chemical signals, allowing the brain to coordinate everything from movement to emotions and thoughts. Neuroscience, the multidisciplinary field dedicated to understanding the nervous system, brings together biology, psychology, and medicine in its quest to decode the secrets of the brain. Neuroscientists investigate how this 3-pound organ shapes our behavior, feelings, and even the decisions we make. Different branches of neuroscience, such as cognitive, behavioral, and clinical neuroscience, approach the mind from distinct angles, whether studying the neural basis of perception, the biological roots of behavior, or the mechanisms of mental disorders. By examining how neurons communicate through the release and uptake of chemicals called neurotransmitters, researchers begin to map the pathways that underlie everything from the simplest reflex to the most abstract thought. The relationship between the brain and behavior is a central concern of biopsychology, a field that bridges the biological structure of the brain and the observable actions of individuals. Biopsychologists study how different brain regions contribute to specific behaviors, how neurotransmitters affect mood and thought, and how disruptions in brain function can lead to changes in mental health. Understanding the brain's role in movement, memory, emotion, and automatic behaviors is essential for any serious discussion of mind control, not as a fantasy of total domination, but as a set of scientific questions about influence and agency. With these foundations in place, we can begin to consider what it means, scientifically, to influence another person's mind. In behavioral science, mind control is not a magical process, but a collection of methods aimed at influencing thoughts and behaviors. These techniques range from subtle forms of persuasion to more direct attempts at behavioral modification. The scientific study of these methods relies on rigorous research, using both quantitative and qualitative approaches, careful experimental design, and a strong commitment to objectivity and ethical responsibility. Researchers analyze human behavior by defining specific categories of action, observing changes over time, and seeking to replicate their findings to ensure reliability. One concept that has emerged from this research is the idea of kernels, fundamental units of behavioral influence. These kernels are evidence-based techniques that can reliably produce changes in behavior. They may work by reinforcing certain actions, altering the cues that precede behavior, or changing an individual's physiological state. For example, reinforcing a behavior with praise or rewards can make it more likely to occur again, while removing or modifying environmental triggers can decrease unwanted behaviors. Even relatively simple interventions, when applied systematically, can have significant effects on how people act and think. The ability to reason about other people's thoughts and intentions is another crucial aspect of behavioral influence. Scientists describe this capacity as theory of mind, spelled TOM, the ability to infer the mental states of others, including beliefs, desires, and motivations. Experimental research in this area explores how people use social information to predict and respond to the behavior of those around them. Understanding theory of mind helps scientists unravel the mechanisms by which social influence operates, from everyday persuasion to more deliberate attempts to shape beliefs and decisions. The scientific investigation of mind control is not limited to the laboratory. The history of attempts to influence the mind often intersects with larger social and political movements, especially during times of uncertainty or conflict. During the Cold War, for instance, the concept of mind control took on new urgency as governments became increasingly interested in the possibility of manipulating thoughts and behaviors for intelligence and military purposes. This period saw the rise of brainwashing in the public imagination, a term that captured both the fears and the fascination of an era marked by ideological rivalry. The origins of the term brainwashing can be traced to the early 1950s during the Korean War. Reports surfaced that American prisoners of war had been subjected to intense psychological manipulation by their captors, fueling speculation about new and sinister techniques for erasing and rewriting the mind. In this climate of suspicion, the Central Intelligence Agency, spelled CIA, launched a series of secret research programs aimed at developing methods for behavior control. The most infamous of these was Project MK-Ultra, a sprawling effort that experimented with drugs, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, and other techniques in the hope of discovering reliable ways to influence or even control the human mind. MK-Ultra and related programs operated at the intersection of mind science and covert operations, reflecting both the ambitions and the anxieties of their time. The experiments often involved administering psychoactive substances such as LSD to human subjects, sometimes without their knowledge or consent, to observe the effects on cognition and behavior. Other research focused on interrogation techniques, seeking ways to break resistance or elicit confessions through psychological stressors or pharmacological agents. The scope and ethics of these experiments have been the subject of sustained scrutiny and controversy, especially after details of the programs became public in the 1970s. Investigations revealed that the government's interest in mind control was as much a product of Cold War fears as of scientific curiosity, and many of the methods explored fell far short of the dramatic results imagined by their proponents. Despite the extensive efforts and resources devoted to these projects, the scientific validity of mind control as popularly conceived remains deeply contested. Most experts agree that the vision of total mental domination, as portrayed in fiction and propaganda, is not supported by evidence. Human behavior is shaped by a complex interplay of biology, experience, environment, and social context, making it resistant to simple or absolute forms of control. While it is possible to influence thought and behavior through various means, persuasion, education, conditioning, or even deception, the idea of a universal mind control technique capable of overriding free will has not been demonstrated in reputable scientific research. The legacy of Cold War-era mind control research continues to influence both scientific inquiry and popular culture. The notion of brain warfare and the specter of covert manipulation have inspired countless books, films, and television shows, blurring the line between fact and fiction. At the same time, advances in neuroscience and behavioral science have led to a more sophisticated understanding of how influence operates at both individual and societal levels. Researchers today are less likely to seek omnipotent techniques of control and more likely to focus on the mechanisms by which beliefs and behaviors change in response to evidence-based interventions. For example, scientists study how changes in physiological state brought about by stress, fatigue, or drug use can alter decision-making and behavior. They examine how reinforcement and manipulation of environmental cues can encourage or discourage certain actions. They also explore the role of social cognition, investigating how people's perceptions of others and their beliefs about what others think shape their attitudes and choices. Each of these insights contributes to a nuanced, empirical understanding of influence far removed from the sensational claims of mind control's early history. Significant gaps in scientific knowledge remain. While researchers can describe many of the processes involved in behavioral influence, the full complexity of the mind and its capacity for autonomy, creativity, and resistance defies easy explanation. Much of what makes human consciousness unique lies in the interplay of countless variables, many of which are only partially understood. The search for methods to reliably and predictably shape the mind is ongoing, guided by the principles of objectivity, replicability, and ethical responsibility that define modern science. In sum, the science of the mind reveals a landscape that is both intricate and elusive. The brain, with its billions of interconnected neurons, governs everything from the most basic bodily functions to the highest reaches of thought and imagination. Efforts to influence the mind, whether through behavioral kernels, social persuasion, or more controversial methods, have a long and complicated history, shaped by both scientific ambition and societal anxiety. While the dream of total mind control remains a fantasy, the study of how thoughts and behaviors can be guided continues to yield valuable insights, illuminating both the power and the limits of human influence. As we move forward, the challenge will be to balance the pursuit of knowledge with a clear-eyed recognition of ethical boundaries, and to remember that the most profound forms of influence are often subtle, relying not on domination but on understanding. The mind, in all its complexity, is not a fortress to be breached, but a landscape to be explored, with curiosity, humility, and deep respect for the mystery at its heart. Imagine the mind as a landscape, intricate and dynamic, where influences flow like rivers, shaping the terrain. For generations, humans have wondered, can these currents be channeled or even redirected? Today, science approaches this question with both curiosity and caution, exploring the boundaries of what is possible through psychological techniques, pharmacological interventions, and advanced technologies. The journey from simple persuasion to direct neuromodulation reveals both the promise and the complexity of influencing the mind. A robust starting point is the domain of psychological influence. Decades of experimental research have shown that people's thoughts and behaviors can be nudged in subtle yet meaningful ways. Psychologists have distilled these effects into frameworks that explain how influence works, often without our conscious awareness. Among these, the mind-space mnemonic stands out, summarizing core psychological levers that reliably shape behavior. These mechanisms include incentives, norms, defaults, salience, and priming, each acting on automatic processes within the brain. For example, shifting the default option in a set of choices can dramatically increase the likelihood that someone will go along with it, while making certain information more salient or emotionally resonant can tip decisions without explicit persuasion. Such techniques are not magical incantations, but carefully structured interventions grounded in empirical evidence. Beyond these behavioral levers, social and digital environments have become powerful amplifiers of psychological influence. The pervasive reach of social media platforms and digital technologies has created new arenas where minds are not just influenced, but sometimes shaped en masse. Research examining these platforms highlights how targeted messaging, algorithmic content curation, and data-driven personalization can exploit cognitive biases and emotional states. Social media, for instance, can reinforce particular beliefs, direct attention, and even polarize groups by selectively presenting information. The debate over whether our free will is compromised by these technologies continues, but there is little doubt that our mental landscapes are being redrawn by external forces, often in ways that operate beneath the threshold of conscious awareness. Artificial intelligence adds another layer to this picture. Modern artificial intelligence systems can analyze vast troves of personal data to predict preferences, tailor content, and subtly manipulate choices. Rather than relying on brute persuasion, these systems use micro-targeted strategies, exploiting known biases to guide behavior with surgical precision. In some cases, this means presenting emotionally charged content at moments of vulnerability or nudging individuals toward particular actions by making certain options more visible or appealing. While these technologies do not override autonomy, they raise pressing questions about the boundaries between influence and manipulation. While psychological and digital strategies act on the mind from the outside in, pharmacological interventions work from within, altering the brain's chemistry to shape thought and emotion. The modulation of brain function through drugs has a long history, but modern research has brought new sophistication to this approach. Scientists have explored how specific substances can enhance or suppress cognitive and emotional processes, offering therapeutic benefits, but also revealing the potential to influence behavior in targeted ways. One area of particular interest is the pharmacological modulation of empathy. Drugs such as oxytocin, the so-called love hormone, have been shown to increase trust and social bonding in controlled studies, while substances like MDMA can heighten emotional openness and empathy. Clinical trials have measured the effects of these interventions, noting that while changes in empathy can be observed, they are not universal or uniform. Instead, the response to pharmacological agents is shaped by individual biology, context, and dosage, and the clinical use of such methods is constrained by safety and ethical considerations. Beyond emotions, pharmacological research has also focused on cognitive function. For example, medications that alter the dynamics of neural networks can modulate attention, memory, and executive control. Studies have shown that certain drugs can shift the brain from a resting state to focused attention, potentially enhancing performance on specific tasks. Clinical research continues to investigate the effects of modulating brain oscillations, the rhythmic patterns of neural activity that underlie cognition, through targeted pharmacological interventions. While these approaches hold promise for treating cognitive deficits or psychiatric disorders, their ability to reliably and selectively control complex mental states remains a subject of ongoing investigation. Stepping into the realm of devices and direct neural modulation brings us to some of the most striking advances in mind influence. Technologies that stimulate or record brain activity have moved from science fiction into the clinic and, in some cases, into experimental use for cognitive enhancement. Among the most prominent are neuromodulation techniques such as transcranial magnetic stimulation, TMS, transcranial direct current stimulation, TDCS, and deep brain stimulation, DBS. Transcranial magnetic stimulation uses powerful, focused magnetic fields to induce electrical currents in specific regions of the brain. This approach can temporarily enhance or suppress brain activity, offering a non-invasive way to modulate mood, perception, or cognition. For example, transcranial magnetic stimulation has shown promise in treating depression by targeting neural circuits involved in mood regulation, and research continues to refine the precision of stimulation to maximize therapeutic benefit. Transcranial direct current stimulation, by contrast, applies weak electrical currents through electrodes on the scalp to alter the excitability of neurons. While transcranial direct current stimulation is less powerful than transcranial magnetic stimulation, it is portable and has been explored for a range of applications, from improving attention to aiding rehabilitation after stroke. These non-invasive methods are complemented by more invasive techniques such as deep brain stimulation. Deep brain stimulation involves implanting electrodes directly into the brain to deliver electrical pulses to targeted regions. Originally developed for movement disorders like Parkinson's disease, deep brain stimulation is now being explored for psychiatric conditions such as severe depression or obsessive-compulsive disorder. The precise mechanisms by which these devices modulate neural circuits are still being unraveled, but their capacity to alter thought, mood, and behavior in measurable ways is well established. Clinical guidelines govern their use, emphasizing that the risks and benefits must be carefully weighed. Another cornerstone of brain modulation is electroconvulsive therapy, ECT, which uses controlled electrical currents to induce brief seizures in the brain. Electroconvulsive therapy has a long and controversial history, but in modern practice, it is administered under anesthesia and is considered a highly effective treatment for certain severe mental illnesses. Repetitive transcranial magnetic stimulation, RTMS, vagus nerve stimulation, VNS, and other device-based interventions further expand the toolkit available to clinicians and researchers seeking to influence the mind through direct neuromodulation. Perhaps the most dramatic developments in recent years have come from the field of brain-computer interfaces, BCIs. These technologies create direct communication pathways between the brain and external devices, enabling information to flow in both directions. Early experiments with animals demonstrated that neural signals could be transmitted between rats to coordinate tasks, opening the door to the possibility of brain-to-brain communication. In the human domain, researchers have achieved remarkable milestones by linking brain signals to computers or even to other brains. One landmark experiment used a combination of electroencephalography, EEG, and transcranial magnetic stimulation to transmit conscious thoughts from one person to another across continents. The process involved encoding a sender's intention as neural data, transmitting this information over the internet, and decoding it to elicit a physical response in the receiver. In another demonstration, a team created a human brain-to-brain interface that allowed one participant to send a command via EEG and TMS to another participant who then executed a physical action, such as pressing a button in a computer game. These feats, while still rudimentary, illustrate the potential for direct mind-to-mind communication that bypasses traditional sensory channels. The implications of brain-computer interfaces extend beyond communication. In clinical settings, brain-computer interfaces have enabled paralyzed individuals to control robotic limbs, restoring a measure of autonomy and function. Some systems have even allowed the restoration of speech in individuals who have lost this ability by decoding neural signals associated with language and converting them into synthesized speech. Non-invasive brain-computer interface technologies, such as digital holographic imaging, are now making it possible to record neural activity without the need for surgery, promising broader accessibility and fewer risks. Despite these advances, brain-computer interfaces face significant challenges, particularly in maintaining long-term accuracy and reliability. The brain's complexity and variability from day to day, even from moment to moment, make it difficult to achieve seamless, consistent control. Nevertheless, the field is advancing rapidly, and the potential applications range from rehabilitation and disease treatment to cognitive enhancement and beyond. The possibilities of neurotechnology are not limited to restoring lost function. Emerging research explores the use of these tools for cognitive augmentation, enhancing memory, attention, or other mental faculties in healthy individuals. Device-based modulation of neural circuits is being investigated as a therapeutic option for psychiatric disorders, with the goal of personalizing interventions to the unique neural signatures of each patient. Clinical trials increasingly feature closed-loop systems, where neural sensing and modulation are combined to create feedback-driven treatments that adapt in real time. It is important to note, however, that the ability to control the mind is far from absolute. Even the most sophisticated neurotechnologies operate within the constraints of biology, individual variability, and ethical oversight. The dream of total mind domination remains firmly in the realm of fiction. What science offers is a growing repertoire of methods that, in combination, allow for modulation and guidance, not control of thought, mood, and behavior. As researchers continue to push the boundaries, they do so with a keen awareness of the ethical landscape. The manipulation of mental capabilities, whether through psychological nudges, pharmaceuticals, or neural devices, raises profound questions about autonomy, consent, and the nature of free will. Clinical guidelines, regulatory frameworks, and ongoing public debate are essential to ensuring that these tools are used responsibly. The frontier of mind influence is thus defined not by the fantasy of omnipotent control, but by the nuanced interplay of science, technology, and ethics. Each new technique brings with it not only possibilities for healing and enhancement, but also responsibilities to individuals, to society, and to the enduring mystery of the human mind. As we look to the future, the challenge will be to harness these methods wisely, always mindful that the mind, in all its complexity, is never just an object to be controlled, but a landscape to be understood. Imagine a world where the boundaries between thought and technology have become porous, where the impulses sparking within a single brain can be decoded, interpreted, and perhaps even acted upon by machines or by other people. This is not the premise of a dystopian novel, but the emerging reality shaped by mind control technologies and methods. Though still imperfect, these tools are advancing faster than many of the ethical frameworks designed to guide them. As we approach the frontier of influencing, decoding, and even altering mental states, questions of ethics, risk, and responsibility rise to the forefront, demanding a new kind of vigilance. The dream or nightmare of mind control has long been colored by fear and fascination, but today's tools are tangible. Researchers and ethicists now face dilemmas that once existed only in speculative fiction. One of the most urgent concerns is the weaponization of neuroscience. The prospect of brain weapons, as some experts warn, is no longer fantasy. There is historical precedent. Manipulation of the central nervous system for hostile purposes has occurred before, but today's tools are more sophisticated, with the potential to bypass traditional defenses and target the mind directly. This looming threat has prompted calls for global action, as the misuse of neuroscience could have consequences that extend far beyond individual privacy, affecting national security and international stability. The risks extend beyond warfare or espionage. Everyday neurotechnologies, devices, and interventions that can sense, interpret, or influence brain activity are entering clinical practice and, in some cases, consumer markets. Public attitudes toward these technologies are complex, shaped by hope for medical breakthroughs but shadowed by concerns about autonomy, privacy, and the fundamental nature of selfhood. Research shows that people are cautiously optimistic about using neurotechnologies to treat brain disorders, yet wary of applications that veer into enhancement or manipulation. The line between therapy and enhancement, between helping and controlling, is notoriously blurred. The possibility that a device or intervention might alter not just symptoms but also personality, motivation, or identity itself prompts deep unease. Researchers themselves share these concerns. Those working on adaptive deep brain stimulation, for example, have voiced ethical anxieties about how such technologies could affect a person's autonomy, privacy, and sense of self. When a device automatically adjusts brain activity in response to sensed patterns, it raises pressing questions. Who is truly in control? The person, the device, or the designer of the algorithm? What does free will mean if choices can be nudged or overridden by an implanted system? These are not hypothetical musings, but practical issues facing clinicians, engineers, and patients. Organizations such as the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization have begun to develop frameworks for addressing these issues on a global scale. Their perspective highlights that the stakes are not merely technical or clinical, they are fundamentally ethical. Neurotechnologies pose risks to human dignity, autonomy, and mental privacy, challenging long-held assumptions about what it means to be an independent person. The United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization emphasizes the need for international regulation, warning that without coordinated oversight, the race to develop and deploy these tools could outpace our ability to ensure their responsible use. The challenge of safeguarding privacy is especially acute when it comes to neural data, the intimate, often unfiltered record of what is happening inside the brain. Brain-machine interfaces, which create a direct link between neural activity and external devices, offer immense promise for restoring lost function or enabling new forms of communication. but they also open the door to unprecedented forms of surveillance, discrimination, or coercion. The raw data produced by these systems is unlike any other. It can reveal intentions, preferences, even unspoken thoughts. If misused, this data could be exploited in ways that undermine individual rights or deepen social inequalities. Legal frameworks are struggling to keep up. As neurotechnology advances, the boundaries between medical, commercial, and personal uses blur, and traditional safeguards for health data or personal information may no longer suffice. Protecting neural data is further complicated by the fact that it can be generated outside clinical settings, accessed by third parties, or combined with other digital data to create detailed, revealing profiles. Some scholars argue that new categories of rights and protections are needed, tailored to the unique sensitivities of mental privacy. Others point to the risk of discrimination. If access to or interpretation of neural data becomes a criterion for employment, insurance, or social participation, existing inequalities could worsen. A vivid example of these dilemmas is emerging at the intersection of neurotechnology and artificial intelligence. As artificial intelligence systems are trained to decode patterns of brain activity, questions arise about who controls the resulting information and how it is used. Patient privacy, already under strain in the digital age, faces new threats when neural data can be analyzed with unprecedented sophistication. The legal and ethical challenge is to ensure that individuals retain meaningful control over their own minds, even as they benefit from advanced technologies. Neural implants also raise a host of ethical issues. The question of access looms large. If such technologies are available only to those with resources, social inequality may widen. More subtly, the effects of these devices on identity and autonomy remain incompletely understood. Some users of brain implants report feeling not entirely themselves, or uncertain whether their thoughts and actions are truly their own. For others, the benefits far outweigh these concerns, but the diversity of experience underscores the need for careful, individualized consideration. The specter of neuroweapons tools designed to disrupt or control mental states for military or coercive purposes adds another layer of risk. The history of brain stimulation for behavioral control is complex, marked by both exaggerated claims and genuine breakthroughs. Yet the potential for misuse remains real, and experts have called for international regulation to prevent a new arms race centered not on physical destruction, but on the manipulation of mind and will. Some have suggested the need for neuroshields measures to protect brain capital, both individual and collective, from the dangers posed by hostile applications of neuroscience. At the heart of these debates lies the concept of mental privacy, a right both ancient and newly imperiled. Advances in neurotechnology threaten to erode the legal and philosophical frameworks that have long protected the sanctity of thought. As brain recording and mind-reading tools improve, the risk grows that thoughts, intentions, or unspoken preferences could be extracted without consent or even against a person's will. Scholars and advocates are exploring regulatory approaches to protect neural data, but consensus remains elusive. The tension between innovation and protection is palpable, with some arguing that overly restrictive rules could stifle beneficial research, while others warn that the cost of inaction could be profound. In the United States, legislative efforts are beginning to take shape in response to these emerging threats. One proposed measure, the so-called MIND Act, aims to study and recommend standards for protecting neural data. This effort reflects a growing recognition that existing laws may not adequately address the unique challenges posed by brain-based information. Definitions, regulatory gaps, and enforcement mechanisms are all under scrutiny as policymakers grapple with the implications for civil liberties and public trust. The regulatory landscape is evolving rapidly, both at the state and federal levels. Organizations are being forced to confront new questions about data governance, liability, and transparency. Some states are experimenting with proactive measures to safeguard neural data, while federal initiatives seek to establish baseline protections. The implications for individuals and for society as a whole are profound. As neural data becomes increasingly valuable, the pressure to monetize, analyze, or control it will only intensify. In a landmark move, UNESCO has adopted the first global framework for the ethical development and use of neurotechnology. The principles enshrined in this framework include proportionality, ensuring that interventions are justified by their benefits and risks, as well as respect for freedom of thought, privacy, and transparency. These guiding values aim to strike a balance between innovation and protection, recognizing both the promise of neuroscience and the perils of misuse. The ethical challenges extend beyond data privacy. Brain recording and mind-reading technologies raise questions about cognitive liberty, the right to think freely without interference or surveillance. The potential for erosion of self-conception is real, As tools to access or influence thought become more powerful, our sense of where the self ends and the outside world begins may shift. Some ethicists worry that the mere possibility of having one's thoughts monitored or manipulated could have a chilling effect on creativity, dissent, or personal growth. Even beyond neurotechnology, the use of artificial intelligence in mental health contexts has sparked concern. Recent studies have found that artificial intelligence chatbots, when deployed in therapeutic settings, can systematically violate ethical boundaries, underscoring the need for robust ethical, educational, and legal standards. Such findings illustrate how the risks of mind control are not confined to the laboratory or the battlefield, but are already present in the digital tools we use every day. As we look to the future, the direction of research and regulation remains uncertain. There is broad agreement among experts that a combination of technical safeguards, ethical oversight, and legal protections will be needed to navigate the complexities ahead. But the details, how to define and enforce mental privacy, how to ensure equitable access, how to guard against coercion or abuse, are still being worked out. International cooperation, public engagement, and ongoing dialogue among stakeholders will be essential. One thing is clear: the age of mind control is no longer science fiction, yet neither is it an inevitable dystopia. The technologies and methods that can influence, read, or even alter the mind offer immense promise for healing, learning, and connection. But they also carry risks that strike at the heart of what it means to be human: our dignity, autonomy, and freedom to think and feel as we choose. The future will be shaped by the choices we make now, to regulate wisely, to weigh risks against benefits, and to anchor our pursuit of knowledge in respect for the mystery and sanctity of the human mind. In this new era, the most profound question may not be what we can do to the mind, but what we should do and how we can ensure that technology serves rather than subverts our deepest values.